everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Lydia Kincaid, and I'm Managing Director of iiM, Innovation in Motion. We invest in seed to Series A, ag, animal health, and human health companies. And today we have some special guests with us, a couple of co-founders of one of our portfolio companies, AgriSync. We have Jerrod Westfahl and Niemann. So we're going to let them tell you a little bit about their company, what their plans are, some lessons that they've learned, so that you can learn a little bit about their journey. So Jerrod, maybe you could start us off. Can you tell us what AgriSync is and where the idea for AgriSync came from?
Sure. Thanks, Lydia, for the chance to join you today. So AgriSync exists to enable world-class customer experiences to happen at the front lines of field-based industries like agriculture, construction, and animal health. And we do that by building a software platform that serves as a collaboration tool for the folks at the front lines, their customers, and the brands that those frontline experts represent. We've been at it for about 6 years, and the idea for AgriSync and the need for a better field-based collaboration software system really came from some personal experiences Casey saw in his prior role and in his family farm situation. So Casey, maybe you can give the quick idea origin story.
Yeah.
AgriSync idea.
Yeah, and thanks, Lydia, for having us today. We appreciate it. So, I'm a farm kid from Kansas, and I had found myself at Microsoft, and I was in Microsoft's cloud group, right? We were trying to convince large organizations that the cloud was going to be a big deal a few years ago. And so I would go into these large companies. A lot of times they were equipment companies or, big ag companies in the Midwest. And all of them were working on really interesting, things for the cloud. Most of them were around precision ag, data, analytics, telematics, all great things to run in the cloud. But when I would go home to our family farm in Kansas and talk to my dad and uncles, I realized that one of the bigger problems that needed to be solved was the support, communication, and specifically the human capital element of agriculture, right? We were bringing all this technology in, but we had a shortage of experts who could actually help a farmer get the ROI out of that technology, right? What if something breaks? In the past, if something breaks, you could kind of manually fix it. Well, now with technology, you really needed that expert advisor to be able to kind of handhold you through that. And so I was starting to think about, well, how could a service be built that would not only help farmers connect with those trusted advisors when they needed them most, but more importantly, start to really building a great customer experience. And think about the way technology has influenced the way that we want to interact with companies. It's no different for a farmer. And so what we wanted to do was kind of make for a very simple and frictionless platform that would allow farmers to have one-touch access to their trusted advisors, independent of where they were. And so that was really the genesis for, me deciding to leave the comfort and confines of Microsoft, right, where I'd been for about 15 years, and, went to my basement, started working on what is now AgriSync. And once I kind of realized that as I talked to different prospective customers that we had something, having the idea is sometimes what I would consider the easy part. Turning that idea into a company, turning that idea into, a profitable entity, turning that idea into a business governance where you can go out and both attract customers and talent. That's when I knocked on Jerrod's door and said, hey, I need some help, because he had done some of this before in a prior life. And I said, I've got this idea, but I need a wingman to come in and help me with all the things that I stink at. And if you're a founder listening to this, one of the good lists to build is, here's a few things that I know, and here's a longer list probably of things that I don't know. And who are the people in my network that I could go out and I really credit, my first and best sales approach was convincing Jerrod to come and help me, build this, because I understood the technology and the sales side, but you need someone who understands finance and legal and operations and business governance and all of these other things that you need to have, raising capital, if you will. Jerrod's, done a phenomenal job of that within our organization. So my encouragement to, founders is to make sure that when you're building that core team and maybe thinking about a co-founder, don't necessarily find somebody with the exact same resume or talents that you have, right? Find somebody that's got a different set of skills, because you're going to need both to probably get something off the ground.
Casey, that was great. And thanks, Jerrod, for the introduction as well. So Casey, you mentioned like the idea was the easy part, and then you had to put together this like actual business and start to grow your team. So you reached out to Jerrod, and then what were the next steps from there? How did you continue to grow the company? And then what made maybe you both realized, actually, this could get really big. This could be a venture-backed business as opposed to maybe a lifestyle business that grows slowly over time.
Yeah, no, and I think that's an important distinction for founders to think about early on is what level of scale do they want to achieve, right? What are they driving for? Because there's a lot of great entrepreneurs who are building lifestyle businesses. And I think once you've started a business, you appreciate that more, whether you're walking into, a flower shop or visiting somebody on their own farm. I mean, there's a lot of great lifestyle entrepreneurship that are good things to have. I think once we decided that in our case and again, a lot of times a software as a service or, which is what we are, a SaaS-based company, global scale is important, and the ability to reach kind of the customer experience in ag that we wanted to really redefine, the ability to do that, internationally was going to require us to, hire a cadre of people and pursue a set of customers that was going to cause us to need, venture capital. And so again, being, somewhat new to that, I wanted to have a partner who understood, the need for how to do that and what are things to look for and how do you, a lot of times we think, yes, we're giving a pitch to, a potential investor, but we're also sometimes interviewing them as a long-term stakeholder in our business. And I think the thing that we were, we wanted to have investors, but we also wanted to have investors who understood our business, understood the industry that we were in, and, had a focus on that. Because I think sometimes, especially today, there's probably lots of capital, but is that real capital? And do we understand in agriculture, maybe the cyclical nature of our business? And, I think we got, we were a lot more efficient when we started thinking about, let's find investors who we don't first have to explain what agriculture is. Because if they understand the basics of our industry, they're going to understand the specific problem that we're trying to solve. And so I always encourage people, find like-minded investors that understand your industry, because people will typically invest first in what they understand, and then try to find some common ground around core values and, things that are important as you build out your business. Because in the longer run, right, let's say that one of those investors maybe becomes a board member or, you want to have investors who, in these really important decisions, as a founder, you're interviewing your future boss. So it's in your best interest to find people with, a set of core values and principles and the way that they want to do business that align to what you're doing. I don't know, Jerrod can maybe speak to a little bit of some of our early efforts as it related to, raising capital, because he was the lead on that.
I'd highlight maybe a couple of things Casey said. Is, if you're thinking about what makes a particular business plan or idea venture fundable, it's tempting for early career or first time entrepreneurs to fall into the trap of believing that closing a fundraising round is success. because it's not. It's a step along the way potentially, but it's not the end. It's not what you should be trying to do just to get a press release about how much you raised at what valuation. It's a financing mechanism, right? It's a growth acceleration mechanism to take venture money, and you've got to keep that in mind, and also be, I guess, brave enough to realize that if your business idea doesn't fit the venture funding model, that's okay, right? But don't go into it without giving some critical thought to that fit piece of your capital and financing structure that you want to use. But when it fits and when it works, it's great. So I think when we first realized we were getting enough positive feedback from those early customer conversations, and we were doing, the basic homework that every founder should do if they're thinking about trying to grow faster than their revenues can alone support, as far as the expense burn and the scale out costs, you got to look at the market opportunity, and you've got to understand, is this market big enough, and is it attainable enough, and is our model to go to the market the right fit to help us get from the size we are today to a big multiple of that in a fairly short period of time. And there's nothing guaranteed, but you ought to be able to do some pretty heavy duty kind of risk thinking about what are the chances that you can go from what you are today to a big multiple of that in a short period of time. And then how can you articulate and explain your plan and answer questions from investors that want to poke holes and challenge you, but also make you stronger in refining your plan during the diligence process of an investment.
Well, thank you both. That's really helpful. Maybe Jerrod, if you could add on, what does your fundraising look like over time? So
Sure.
How did you get started, and then your second round or third round? How could you describe those to our audience?
Yeah, I'll maybe add just a couple of other elements to it for especially for the entrepreneurs that might be in the audience. Mm-hmm. Early on, it's okay to think about pulling a bundle of sticks together for financing, right? One of those bundles is pitch contest prizes, right? The $5,000 to $20,000 things, right? Early on, the time versus return trade-off on those is probably worth it. As you get a little more mature, the time versus return trade-off on those diminishes quite a bit, and that's when you have to be thinking about, okay, are there early public sponsored programs like a state technology grant, or a state development and demonstration grant, or even a non-recourse loan for a few tens of thousands or even $100,000. Kind of take it to your second step of keeping the lights on and bringing team members on and building things that your customers have a chance to buy, right? But then pretty quickly, you've got to understand, are you hitting the traction points that allow you to get in front of an angel investor group or another early stage investor group and pitch them on writing bigger checks? And for us, that started with taking some convertible debt, and we took that as debt, but we were having conversations with lenders who understood that this wasn't a situation where we were going to carry a note and pay them back the note plus interest. Everyone wanted and expected that note would convert into equity, and that those investors would become long-term equity stakeholders in our business. But doing debt first, one of the conveniences for all people involved, investors and founders or entrepreneurs, is that it allows you to have more time to prove out a few more things so that you can have a more, I guess, rational and balanced discussion about the valuation for, so if you invest $1, how much percentage ownership of the business does that buy from an equity standpoint? Early on, most companies don't have a good sense for that, and most investors don't either. And so it turns into a bit of a sticking point in the conversation. So convertible debt can be a way to break through that sticking point, give yourself more time, like we did, to get more traction, and then convert it into an equity round. So after we had a few $100,000 in convertible debt, we went out officially for what we called a Series Seed preferred stock financing. And we looked for additional capital from a new lead investor. And we were fortunate to find an institutional investor. We were fortunate to find an institutional investor who's familiar with agriculture and is in the middle part of the U.S., who was willing to lead our Series Seed investment round, and who was a good fit for the other investors we already had through our convertible debt. And so we did a convertible. We converted the debt into equity, took new cash, and everybody who were outside investors or lenders turned into preferred stockholders. And that really was the last capital we've had to raise. We've been fortunate in that sense because our flow of income from customers since that point has allowed us to maintain the right amount of cash cushion to not just run today, but also fund our additional aggressive growth steps around hiring and geographic expansion and product improvement.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that fundraising life cycle has worked really well for you guys, and it's really made a lot of sense the way that you started and where you're going now, and now you're supporting your business with revenue. And from an investor's point of view, we invested. I mean, AgriSync was one of our earliest investments, and we invested right as you guys were starting to convert some of your pilots into paying customers, and so revenue was just barely getting generated. But then over the course of a couple of years, we saw the multiple on that revenue start increasing pretty rapidly, and your customer base expanded with not only like within your existing customers, but new customers that were coming in. So we saw that growth. And like a lot of investors do, we doubled down and we invested again, which we love to do. We love to support our portfolio companies and help them grow and continue to be a part of the journey. And so we always appreciated working with Jerrod and Casey in the fundraising process and throughout as well. I always enjoy our conversations and our updates that we have. So that's also been a part of their fundraising process, keeping all of their investors up to date as they go. And they've come in a couple times and presented even to our big investor group about what's been going on. So everybody has a good idea of what's going on. I think Jerrod and Casey have been really great communicators as part of our portfolio as well. So switching gears a little bit, maybe Casey, you could speak to this. From the time you first had this idea for the business to where you are today, have there been pieces of it that have changed, either in big ways or small ways? Is this where you thought you'd be when you first had this idea?
Well, I think, we all, if we're building something new, we anticipate change, right? We anticipate that we may not have all of the answers initially, and certainly that was the case. So I would say our fundamental belief that the customer experience in agriculture could be improved, through technology, that fundamental belief has remained constant. I do think early on in some of our thesis scenarios, in terms of where revenue would come, we had lots of ideas about that in the early days. And then you get in the marketplace and you actually start to really learn and validate revenue streams are. In our system, there's, typically a farmer, some sort of service provider, and then there's these bigger platform, organizations, think big ag type scenarios. In the early days, we thought farmers would be a point of monetization. And I'm so glad we didn't count on that, because think of all the touch points we would have had to monetize individual farmers, right? To pay for sort of a la carte, support and communication. Instead, we really monetized on that service, that intermediary. And that intermediary was saying, we've got a labor crisis with, frontline experts in ag. There's not enough of them. And so we want to invest and pay for technology that allows us to scale the experts that we do have. And then what we learned is that we also have an opportunity to monetize kind of those broader platform ag companies who say, I have a brand and my brand is important to me. And I would love to understand, what my distribution channel is doing around supporting my brand. And so, we kind of shifted, if you will, from that in-customer farmer where there's a whole lot of them. Touch points would have been hard. Distribution would have been hard. And we shifted our sales and marketing more toward that middle service provider. And what we realized is they would go out and invite their customers into the platform. And their usage and utilization would also help us get introduced to the platform brands that they use. And I think this whole notion of what is your go-to-market distribution is really important to figure out, because entrepreneurs are typically great at identifying and solving a problem. But as a group, we sometimes really stink at distribution.
Anything you wanted to add to that, Jerrod?
No, I think Casey's hitting it well, and we'll give him a chance to come back. I'll maybe pick it up here. Yeah, that whole idea or opportunity to maximize the efficiency of your revenue stream, that's where flexibility from day one is paramount. As you're an operator, as an entrepreneur trying to execute, it's okay to go with customers to the point where they're willing to pay, so long as the math fits your overall financial projections and model, or has a chance to. Say the other thing that maybe was a little different for us, changed from day one to today. We expected within agriculture is a big tent, right? We expected within agriculture there would be probably anywhere between 5 and 8 subcategories or sub-industries of experts that have experts in them, I probably should say, and that our solution would be equally well adopted and equally well used by all of them. And what we found out early on was that we were actually having the most straightforward success with 1 or 2 out of the 5 to 8 categories. And so early on, and I would argue even to this day, our focus has been on maximizing what's possible in those 1 or 2 subcategories of the big agriculture industry. And that's for us, that it tends to look like equipment distribution, both in the construction and agriculture side of some of these big platform brands. And that's served us well. And that's been a big enough market opportunity for us to justify focusing on it, rather than saying, hey, we can do that, but we also really, from a challenge or from a pride or from an ego standpoint, we really also just got to go convince this other subcategory to use our stuff. It's good for them. They should figure out it's good for them. We should help them come to that conclusion. We're going to just keep going and hammering on them until they finally figure it out. We have been willing to let go of that bone, if you will, and go back over here and double down on our efforts around where we were getting traction and where there was still significant opportunity, and had worried not so much about being seen maybe as a broad agriculture solution, but let's keep working on a narrower focus, because it's a justifiable opportunity for return to our investors eventually, and it allows us to do the scale out that we want to. And yes, we're a little sad that we weren't able to be a better salesman over here to this category or subcategory of people in the ag industry, but we're moving on from that. And maybe someday we'll circle back to it, but we're not worried about it today. That's probably another thing that's changed since day one.
But it sounds like across the board, like, sure, things have changed, but your intent is still to solve problems within the agriculture industry. And so I think that's really critical for entrepreneurs and investors looking for investment opportunities. Like, if a company is solving a problem and the customers are willing to pay money for that solution, and then that's the silver bullet, if you will. I mean, you just try to force things to work. Maybe isn't the best approach. Of course, you could try new things, but being willing to continue to revisit what the best approach is and where your secret sauce and where your success really lies, I think is really critical to success, not just of your business, but other businesses, other startups as well. So how about some things that you guys are really proud of that AgriSync has achieved over the years?
I'll do one first, Casey, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts. Well, I'll do 2, and then I'll make it hard for you to think of another one. I'm super proud of 2 things. One is that we've had enough progress to be able to expand our team and have really good people in our effort on our staff. and to provide an interesting and challenging but also stable environment for them to plug in from a career standpoint and be big contributors to what we're trying to do. We're not a huge staff. We've got 25 total people on our roster right now. But the people we have are great, and the work we need everyone to contribute every day, and we've got plenty for them to do. And we are in a position, because of some of our successes, to provide stability. And I'm super proud of that. Second thing, I don't know if it's a point of pride. I just get super excited when I randomly hear someone who doesn't know much about AgriSync or know that I might be connected to it. I hear them talking about us in really favorable ways. And I think, wow, that's pretty awesome. So I'm excited about that.
That's very cool. Those are good ones, Jerrod. Casey, can you top those?
I would say, it was exciting when we expanded internationally. That was a big deal. And I think that, not only proved kind of our ability to scale globally, but it forced us to think more, not just about the technology, but also how do we support customers worldwide, and how do we, extend our reach. I also think that, a point of pride is that beyond the service that we have, the team that we built around kind of a common set of core values is really rewarding. So if you think about, any young company, those employees, those team members that are coming to work for you, they're coming in because they want the mission of the company and they want to be part of building something new. And it's exciting when we have those kind of breakthrough moments, and you see a lot of those in a young company, and that's exciting. And so I think, finding great talent and seeing then those people develop, a lot of times if you come into a young company, your ability to maybe play with the sharp knives a little earlier than if you went to a big corporation is one of the appeals of going to that company. And I think for Jerrod and I both, just seeing, young people and their talents grow and develop in their career, and really expand in what they're capable of, that's been a fun, thing for us to really realize. And so, super grateful for that. And I think a lot of what I do today, beyond trying to, be our best cheerleader and think forward, about what's next and how we expand, but is also to be grateful, right, for the fact that we have been able to find our swim lane, find our niche in this broader industry, and, to be thought of as kind of the world-class leader in doing this type of work in agriculture. And I think that's a great mission. I know, Lydia, you guys invest both, not only in ag, but also in health and some other different areas. Those are good areas, right, for us to double down on and invest in as a community, because it really does align well to, kind of this broader mission approach of the type of company that certainly we try to build at AgriSync.
Well, Casey, that's great. And I think as parting words today, maybe we'll hear from Casey and Jerrod. Are there any last pieces of advice? You've given a lot of great advice to entrepreneurs throughout this episode. Anything else that you'd like to add, maybe entrepreneurs should think about as they're starting to build their business?
My encouragement would be to make sure your home team, right, your spouse, your kids, and others are all in for the ride you're about to take them on. Because your dream as an entrepreneur at some point or another is going to become someone else's sacrifice. And so I would encourage if have that alignment, right? I always, whether it be with myself, or new team members, I always want to make sure that, their family, their spouse is kind of in on this mission that we're on, because it's hard work, right? There's going to be some ups and downs. There's going to be some curveballs. There's going to be challenging days. And you want to make sure that your biggest cheerleader at home is in your court. And I think for me, both being, fortunate to have a great support ecosystem at home, but also a great friend and mentor and and wingman at work, and Jerrod has made all the difference, meaning that's how we've gotten through, the bumps in the road. And I think that's a really important thing for all entrepreneurs to kind of, figure out and establish early on. Jerrod?
Yeah, similar vein, I would probably extend it a little further and say, when you're thinking about finding those other early investors and the people who are going to be closest to you in the earliest days, it's great if you have a network that you can draw on, where you or someone you trust has prior experience with those other folks you're considering bringing into your team. Because ultimately, it's easy to say this as kind of a midlife, mid-career person. It's ultimately who you are working with, and your alignment of your personal values with their personal values will be a constant and a bedrock that allows you to get through a lot of the unexpected rough stuff. And if you don't have that commonality or that alignment around personal values and personal style, it just adds a whole bunch of additional potential friction when things get hard, that makes the hard things feel even harder unnecessarily. So I guess to say it a different way, I would encourage anybody who's just getting started and thinking about building a team or bringing on outside investors. Yes, go fast. Yes, get people excited and get deals closed, to get hiring decisions made. But don't sacrifice around your core values and principles. Stick to those. It will make a big difference in the intermediate and long run if you do.
Great advice. I think as entrepreneurs, we often do try to move so fast, Jerrod, like you were saying, that we forget some of the things that are so important that could make or break the company. And it's just good for life to be focusing on those core values and your personal values as well, and aligning those across your company and your investor base as well. So we'll wrap things up with that. Casey and Jerrod, thank you so much from AgriSync for joining us today. And thanks everyone for listening.